Welcome, everyone, to the July 20th City Council meeting. Welcome to everyone here and at home. First up is a public forum opportunity for individuals to speak to the City Council on any city-related issues except for those items which have already been heard by a hearings official or are on tonight's agenda as a public hearing. Each person will have 3 minutes to speak. When you come to the podium, please give your name, city of residence, and for Eugene residents, your ward if known. The timer and lights indicate the time you have to speak. The red light indicates the end of 3 minutes. And we have, looks like 15 people signed up. First up, John Borowski, followed by Diane Seals. John.
Mayor and City Council, my name is John Borowski. I reside in Crete. I'd like to speak to you to an item on your consent calendar this evening. A lot of times the consent calendar just gets voted on and not really much attention paid to it, but I think tonight it deserves a little special attention. Before you tonight is the proposed CDBG capital facility project. As a member of the CDBG committee, we had to visit the funded and felt that all were worthy. The review was a new approach this year, and I think it worked well, and I think that any concern members had were explained well by staff. I think it's important to you as the mayor and city council to be aware of the good work that this action is doing. Catholic Community Services upgrade for their facility of a walk-in cooler and other renovations. Last year they served over 10,500 people, and they are one of the largest distributors of food for Lane County. The new refrigeration will allow them to serve more fresh food to those folks. The Head Start program at the Whitaker School is getting roof repairs and kitchen renovations. They serve over 4,000 meals, and as well as the Thanksgiving meal that most are aware of. The Looking Glass and Stepping Stones at McKay Lodge, they serve juvenile boys that are at risk, and they've got a pretty good 80% success rate of moving them to a better level of care. And then the fourth one is the Shelter Care Homeless Medical Recuperation Facility. And they had some roof and structural issues that were also being done. That's short-time housing for people who are being discharged from the hospital but are homeless, so that they don't go right from the hospital to the streets. They have a chance to heal before they get there. As you're aware, much of the money that the city's budget has strings attached to it. This money has strings wrapped in red tape. And Stephanie Jennings and Nicole Nowak have done an outstanding job of both working with the committee and the providers to bring this up. So I just wanted to make sure that you guys got to know what was happening. It's well over $1 million that is being spent on these facilities. And so when people ask you, what are we doing in this community to help the vulnerable, this is one of the things.
Thank you. Diane Seals is next, followed by Brittany Quick-Warner.
Hello, Mayor and Council. My name is Diane Seals. I reside in Junction City, and I'm one of 75 artists in the New Zone Gallery Collective. New Zone has inspired thousands of stories over the past 2 decades, but I'd like to tell you what it means to me and ask for your support. I moved to the great city for the arts and outdoors in 2013 because I was attracted to Eugene's emphasis on the arts and its quirkiness. I remember my first Friday art walk and how the gallery seemed to replicate art walk offerings in other cities with the required stable of 1 to 6 artists showing lovely pieces. I was stopped, however, by a crowd trying to enter the New Zone Gallery. The moderator had continued on, but over 400 walkers remained at New Zone as music floated through the air. My mouth dropped open as my eyes moved through the 300-piece collection of diverse community art. I remember nodding as one admirer stated it was a feast for the eyes. The show was called Zone for All, one of 2 yearly non-juried community shows. How cool. Eugene had something vital and unique for visual arts. We weren't like any other city. My awe for New Zone only grew as I became a member of the collective. What was not to love about 75 artists focused on sharing their love of art with the community and with each other? I have learned more from daily interactions with my collective colleagues than I did in my art degree program. I love working intake at community shows as aspiring artists sparkle when they present their work and later as they hear patrons' feedback. I love that the gallery offers free wall space to groups like Oregon Glass Guild, whose proceeds go to Women's Space. I love that New Zone artists open their studios to high school interns for a semester of learning. I love working the New Zone desk as patrons drag friends in to see the new shows. To sum up, visual arts gallery opportunities are disappearing in Eugene, while performance arts are thriving. And I ask our city to step up and support our visual arts scene before it disappears. Performance arts are funded each time a ticket is sold, while visual artists depend on galleries to show and sell work. Galleries offer free shows and bring customers downtown, where dollars are spent in many venues. I understand in the next few years we may have an art hub where performing artists will have practice and performance space, and visual artists a studio space.
Thank you. Next up is Brittany Quick Warner, followed by Art Kennedy.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Brittany Quick Warner. I'm a resident of Ward 8. I'm here tonight representing the Eugene Area Chamber of Commerce as our Director of Business Advocacy. On Wednesday afternoon, you'll have the opportunity to review and decide on a MUPD application for an important and exciting potential opportunity for housing development in our core of downtown at the old Rogue Brewery space on Olive Street. We've had the opportunity to learn about this project, review the MUPD application, and we strongly urge you to grant this necessary exemption and support this much-needed housing downtown. Last week, we were again reminded of our community's vision for growth and population accommodation in our core. You'll remember that 1,000 of the 1,600 unit deficit are expected to be built downtown and enabled by necessary economic development tools like temporary tax exemptions. 36 units in this development barely make a dent in that 1,000 units needed, but we will never get to 1,000 if we can't get to 36. So the council has an AIS that outlines how this proposal aligns with our important goals and policies as our community and council have already committed to. And it's important that we continue to connect the dots between our community goals and the issues that we see in front of us and not look at each of them in a vacuum. Last summer, we updated the MUPD program to reflect our community values, and this project is the first to come forward since we've done so. They've successfully completed the application and outreach process, and they've outlined all the things that they're going to do with this. Not only are they proposing to redevelop that underutilized and currently vacant space, but they are going to add 4 additional stories of housing and support our sustainability goals for density. Additionally, they've indicated that when the housing initially opens, 100% of those 36 units will be moderate income, and no fewer than 30 will remain that way throughout the longevity of the tax exemption. According to a survey sent to 350 young professionals here in Eugene after our first Young Professionals Summit, when they asked what the priorities for improvement to help retain and attract young professionals here, the first was expanded job opportunities. They need more places to be able to work and to move around with good wages. And the second was downtown revitalization, including more housing opportunities and spaces for them to live downtown. So this validates national research, and it suggests and requests from our own young professionals here in Eugene that that's something they really want. The MUPD application and development supports our community vision, supports our sustainability goals, our businesses struggling to attract and retain talent, and it supports our young professionals. So I hope you, in return, will support that MUPD application. Thanks.
Art Kennedy is next, followed by, it looks like Michael Gannon.
My name is Art Kennedy. I live in Springfield. Mayor Piercy and council members, I'd like to speak on behalf of the New Zone Gallery. I serve on the board, and I've been a member for 8 years. Our landlord for 6 years has been the Oregon Contemporary Theater. They've been very generous to us with a very low rent, and however, they need to use the space for other purposes. So we need to move. We have nothing but gratitude for them for the support they've given us for 6 years. I would like to suggest a commonality between Hayward Field and the New Zone Gallery as a way of speaking to the value of the New Zone to the city. We are all familiar with the wonderful track meets that take place at Hayward Field. There is a very special track meet that happens there called the All Comers Meet. And we have something just like that at the New Zone Gallery. Twice a year we have All Comers Art Meets. 5 shows a year are for members only, but twice a year we invite members of the community to participate, submitting their art. These are really rocking art shows. They came about originally because of the mayor's art show, and back when artists had to bring their physical pieces in to be judged, and there was a list posted on a certain day, and if you were not selected, you had to pick up your piece and carry it home. However, our gallery coordinator would be there to direct them to the Salon de Refusés. And that was a very special show, as I'm sure many of you know. You may not know, however, that there was one piece that was in the Salon de Refusés that now hangs in the Smithsonian Institution, in the Museum of the American Indian. The artist was Jenny Taylor, and because of the New Zone and the Salon de Refusés, she had a wonderful accomplishment. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I think it's Michael Gannon's up next, followed by Sue Saralupe.
Good evening. I'm Michael Gannon. I live in Eugene. I wanted to address some of the issues that are coming before you, but it seems to me usually useful to try to tie them together. And I found myself thinking today, as I was trying to decide what to talk about, how much Teddy Roosevelt had to buck the system to entertain a black person at the White House for dinner. It was rather startling to him, the outcry in the country and the rejection. And he was very timid for a while about having another person of black color for dinner. And as I watched the city and the county try to decide what to do about the Nightingale rest stop, I realized that many of the blinders were on the public and government officials. And as I come into Eugene, crossing the Ferry Street Bridge, I look across at that really extraordinary structure on East Broadway that you approved a couple of years ago, and I believe the final agreement was a $1 million subsidy in taxes for a while, instead of, because it was during a time when the MUFTI was not was in abeyance. So I happened to come in here one evening when one of the developers had flown in from New Jersey to talk to you about it. And I had this to compare with what I could see from a distance of the process of resiting the Nightingale. And I was very excited when I watched the work session previously, and a couple of people on the council mentioned that maybe the residents of the Nightingale should approve the property before we whisk them into it. But I think that transparency would suggest that you go even further back and you include them in the process, and the community, more of the community at large in the process, because it is, as with the other thing that I wanted to talk about in my remaining 8 seconds, the community development block grant funds for her human service capital facilities have had no public hearings in which you invited poor people to come in and talk about how you serve them.
Next up is Sue Saralupe, followed by Tom Mulhern.
My name is Sue Sierlupe, and I am in George Brown's ward, and I thank him again for his service. I'm also the Occupy Medical, apparently I'm new to the field, Occupy Medical Clinic Manager, and this coming month, August 28th, we will be conducting another demo clinic. This one will be in Coos Bay. We did a little fundraiser with the help of the Bernie Sanders supporters on Saturday, and they raised some money to help us pay for the gas. The reason why we are doing a demo clinic every year, Occupy Medical, in order to share the great service that Occupy Medical does. We try to train other communities on how to do what we do. The Healthcare for All model is very unique, and it's a completely different way to do medicine. With doctors, you may or may not be aware, when they do their service, 30 to 35% of their time is spent arguing with insurance companies. That isn't what most people get excited about when they go to medical school. And at Occupy Medical, you serve, and then you're done with your shift and you get to go home. And healing it's healing. But dealing with insurance companies, it doesn't have that same effect on a person. In fact, I would say from my personal experience, it has the opposite effect. For the people of Coos Bay, we had a patient come from Coos Bay, and they walked there, and it took them 2 days. And when they got to Occupy Medical, we helped them with their condition and then had to peel them out of their boots and help them with their feet, which was unpleasant. This Sunday, we had a Coos Bay CNA come in to learn how to help people in this upcoming clinic. She came from Coos Bay to learn this, even though we're offering the help on the 28th. Again, healing is healing. We have so many people from Coos Bay that are excited to learn about this process. I'm not sure how we're going to fit them in the building, but I'm excited to try. And I love that you are the kind of community that's been helping us and supporting us. We don't have an anti-panhandlance like Coos has, which is Crush House. You have been offering other services for Nightingale and other places like that, and I'm so grateful. A roof is good medicine, and I look forward to more support from you. We will be representing Eugene as we go down there, and we hope to make you proud and look forward to more cooperation between us as we serve those that are in desperate need. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom Mulhern is next, followed by Sally Korn-Oft.
Good evening. I'm Tom Mulhern, representing Catholic Community Service in County. To the Community Development Block Grant Fund acting. We want to say thank you. We're grateful for the fact that we're included on this list of prospective funded projects and for improvements at our Community Service Center on West 6th here in Eugene, where we served, in the fiscal year that just ended, June 30th, we served over 10,500 people with our food and other emergency aid, and another 4,000 people with energy assistance. And 93% of those people were City of Eugene residents, 16% were Latino, 1/3 were homeless, and 2/3 were housed, but they were all very low income. How low? 9 in 10 were below the federal poverty level. 6 in 10 were below the federal poverty level. And every one of those numbers is an encounter with a real person. Last month, the guy came in near the end of the day. The food pantry had already shut down. He said he was hungry. He hadn't eaten in 2 days, and he was obviously kind of shaky. And our staff member offered him a granola bar. He was trying to find something, and he said, well, his teeth were bad. He couldn't eat that. So she went to the back, and she found some yogurt and some pudding and other soft things that he could eat. Then she gave him a list that we have that lists all the places in the community where you can get up. We serve and eat at there. We don't serve meals there. So she gave him this list. He said, thank you. He started to leave, and he hesitated. He walked back over and said, I ought to read this. So she read him the list, went through it, explained everything to him, and helped him figure out where he could go to get a meal. And, you know, we didn't change his life, but we made it a little bit more bearable, that day at least. And we did it with compassion and with respect. And that's what we're going to keep doing, thanks to the kind of help we get from the City of Eugene. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sally Kornoff is next, followed by Diane.
Good evening, Mayor Percy, and I wasn't going to get nervous, I did, and the City Council. My name is Sally Kornott. I live in Ward D, and our family has lived in Eugene for 107 years, and they've all been an artist of one type or another. My grandfather has a gallery named after him at Maud Kearns Art Center. One of my sisters owns a business in town that is involved in the arts. Another sister works at some mission homes. Those that still want to have occupied and be creative. My husband and I have lived in many cities and communities in the United States, from very, very large cities to just burgs, and they all honor their artists. They all have galleries. In 2009, I became aware of the New Zone Gallery, and it offered this budding artist who had never shown their work my very own wall space. And I sold my very first piece for way more than I ever thought I would. Has their wall. So picture yourself doing what you love, whatever it is that you do in your time. Imagine the pride and the satisfaction that you would feel if someone is willing to pay for your craft, whether it was teaching someone how to do something or something tactile that you could have in your home. New Zone Gallery offers this to me and 74 other members every day. We offer for the public the same rewarding experience. No one knows who's hiding under that paintbrush or wood tools that you use or the metal tools that you use. We have so much to continue to offer to our community at New Zone Gallery, and we're so proud of what we offer. We want you to be proud of us too, and we need a new home. As Velma Kelly sang in the movie Chicago, we just can't do it alone. We're going to ask the City of Eugene to consider carefully the education we offer and help us to keep our community, if you can.
Thank you. Diane Story Cunningham is next, followed by Drix.
Hello, I am Diane Story Cunningham. I also represent New Zone Gallery as president of the board. I live in Ward 1. New Zone Gallery was established in downtown Eugene 30 years ago. We have empowered hundreds of artists, supported the efforts of other nonprofit community organizations, and been a vital part of the visual arts in Eugene. We're one of the very few remaining galleries and offer local original art that can often be purchased at an affordable cost. While supporting emerging and established artist members, we also provide 2 open community shows a year for local artists to display their work and have an opportunity to sell. We educate artists in a professional approach to their artistic efforts. We create networking opportunities and offer marketing advice. Our art is non-juried to encourage experimentation and diverse points of view. While we have a stable number of long-term New Zone Gallery members, we also accept 1 or 2 new artists each month, keeping our membership capped at 75. We contribute to our community by providing space on a very inexpensive or free basis for a variety of local nonprofit groups to use for their own fundraisers, practices, or meetings. New Zone Gallery is known for its inclusive response to most requests. We maintain a presence in downtown Eugene through the volunteer efforts of our members, supplemented by dues, small commissions on the sale of art, a rare grant from community organizations, and the support of several local businesses. Our sales increase each year. In 2015, we had over $36,000 in sales of original art. That money, minus a 25% gallery commission, went straight into the pockets of our artists, helping to support them. New Zone Gallery has at least 15 events a year, hiring local music and highlighting Eugene food and beer producers, exposing our visitors to their products. These events bring hundreds of people to our downtown gallery on a monthly basis. We also nurture young artists with internships, working with our local 3A high school in Springfield. We offer free or inexpensive workshops in a variety of mediums for artists of all ages. During downtown celebrations, we line the sidewalk with free art-making opportunities, staffed by member volunteers who also donate materials. Our live drawing sessions are offered to the community on a weekly basis and are well attended. Remain vibrant, critical survival, and important for the visual arts. 75 artists are on the verge of losing their opportunity to show and sell art. Eugene will take another hit to the visual arts if we cannot find a home downtown. We are hopeful the city can help us identify and connect with the owners of vacant downtown buildings so the gallery can continue to represent the visual arts in the city of arts and the outdoors. Thank you.
Drix is next, followed by Chris Cunningham.
Just doing it different. Hi, my name is Drix. I live in Eugene. I live on High Street. I live in it Street. I like to say I'm high over High Street. And thank you, Oregon. Now I'm high over High Street. It just means a better vantage point. When I was a kid, the world was so big to me, and I just couldn't really get a grasp on what it was, other than what was in front of me. And I grew up in a place called University City, Missouri, which is just next to St. Louis. Well, it's part of it. It was during the 60s, which was a tumultuous time. God, I've never used that word on my own. Oh, well, it summed it up. But from the death of Kennedy to all the craziness that followed. But the university started having the trash would start having recycling. We would recycle our newspapers, and then metal. It was really new. The city was growing, and that was growing, and we happened to have a very unique city manager at the time, boom, and he was the one responsible for that. Also, another thing that we had was there was a growing black flight from downtown St. Louis, which was part of the industrial age and movements of communities and all. But the city started to have issues with redlining, press, and racism against that. And he just did it by stopping redlining, doing anything he could, working with the federal agencies. And this was way early in the 60s. And also this person was honored by his city. And it seems that he also brought dumpsters into town. That sounds like a odd sentence, but there weren't dumpsters before. There were garbage cans. And trash people had to dump the cans each time. So they were so grateful that they had dumpsters and recycling that they gave this man an award. And what the award, well, I have it here. Dun, 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 dun. All right. The man's name was city manager. He came to Eugene and was city manager. And we used to have our great festivals at the North Eugene High School auditorium. And when Tony Bennett came to town and went there, Charlie just said, "That's it. This is embarrassing." So he was kind of one of the initiators of our Holt Center. And he looked and he shopped and he hunted and he collected people. And he did. And in recognition, I have no money. You know, I'm full of ideas and I'm eccentric as hell, but I have no money. But I have ideas. And these are 2 pins given to Charlie Henry by the sanitation workers. And I think they would be great if we could make them into bronze and hide them somewhere in the Holt Center. So if anybody out there works with bronze and wants to work with any of us or has an idea, let Mayor Piercy know, and she'll tell me. All right. Thanks, Charge.
I'm in charge. Chris Cunningham is next, followed by Charlene Stroh. Or Stroh.
My name is Chris Cunningham. I live in Eugene, and I live in Betty Taylor's ward. I'm on the Nightingale Steering Committee, and I'd like to express our gratitude for the support of the city of it's provided for sanctuary. We know how hard city and county staffs have worked to find a location for Nightingale Rest Stop. They have helped ensure that the residents stay at the Martin Luther King Boulevard and that it be extended rather than force the camp to shut down. Thank goodness, because Nightingale and other camps like it in Eugene are models for transitional shelter when housing is so scarce. Not a day goes by that I don't think about or know how blessed I am that I can go home and sleep in a bed at the end of the day. And I'm sure you share these same sentiments with me. And I think slowly more people in our community are beginning to imagine what it might be like and the anxiety people experience when they aren't certain if they might have to dispense of their tent platform or pack up their belongings. So we appreciate your consideration and hope that we can extend the stays to a little bit more than 3 or 4 months at a time. But even with the stress that the people from Nightingale have experienced, they've worked really hard in the past week to pack what they can and to clean up the premises in preparation for the 2016 international soccer competitions. And I was there this morning and everything still looks spick and span. Regardless of where Nightingale is, campers who can pitch in and roll up their sleeves to maintain the camp. And when it's time to move, they leave the space in even better condition in which they found it. They will do the same with the property on Martin Luther King Boulevard, where their contract with the city will expire soon. Thank you again for helping ensure that Nightingale continues.
Thank you. Charlene Stroh, or Stroh, is next, followed by Bodie Richards.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing to hear me today. I am speaking on behalf of Head Start in Lane County for the approval of the CDBG grant, more specifically of the Whitaker Building. If you know about the Whitaker Building, it's a...
Introduce yourselves, then we'll hear the right
Oh,
pronunciation.
I'm sorry. Did I not? Charlene Stroh.
Stroh.
I actually live in Fall Creek, but I work in Springfield and Eugene. Thank you. If you've not been to the historical Whitaker Building, I invite you all to come over, and I'd love to give you a tour. It's a building that's full of character and style. It talks a lot about the history not only of Whitaker, I think, but also of Eugene. Head Start bought it in 2004 from 4J. Head Start serves over 1,200 kids in Lane County. In the Whitaker School District alone, we serve over 200, and that number is going to be growing. The thing about the grant, what it's going to help is actually expand a kitchen that we have outgrown. It's also going to help replace a roof that is leaking and an old boiler chimney that definitely needs to be taken down. It also will help provide a better security system to ensure that all our children and our staff are safe. The building is a wonderful building, and we've promised to continue that educational piece and serve the kids not only of the Whitaker district, but we serve them from north and south also. And we'd sure like to continue to do that. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Bodie Richards is next, followed by Tracy Jocelyn.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen of the council, Mayor Piercy. My name is Bodie Richards. I live in Eugene. I'm here to represent Shelter Care, and I'm really here to thank you for awarding one of our programs, the Community Development Block Grant. That program is Shelter Care's Medical Recuperation Program. We serve homeless individuals who have recently been hospitalized and need a safe place to recover. We work with people from between 30 and 90 days. The cost for 30 days in the program is extremely effective. A single day in the hospital is equal to 30 days in our program. We've been operational since fall of 2013, but we've been in a 50-year-old building. The roof has been repaired so many times now that it's full of holes now, and we are going to use some of those monies to repair that roof. We're also going to repair the stucco and give the place a nice paint job. Last year, this program saved the community 756 hospital days and $1.26 million in hospital fees. That's the financials. That equates to about 230 individuals that we helped. About 80% of those people were moved into permanent housing from our program. None of this would be possible without a building from which to operate and provide our services. On behalf of Shelter Care and the people we serve, I'd like to thank the city councilors for their foresight in awarding the funds needed to maintain and repair our medical recuperation building through the Community Block Grant. Thank you.
Thank you. Tracy Jocelyn is next, followed by Robin Hernandez.
Good evening. My name is Tracy Jocelyn, currently living in Mr. Polling's ward at Nightingale Health Sanctuary, 2411 MLK Jr. Boulevard. The residents of Nightingale Health Sanctuary Rest Stop say thank you. Thank you to Mr. Polling for giving us a chance in the Harlow neighborhood. What a truly lovely area of town. Thank you to Chris Pryor for supporting us being in your ward in the future. I missed the conversation. It's been a pretty frustrating part of this, is having people talk about us, but thank you. All the city councils, your constant support, Mr. Brown and Ms. Taylor. Mr. Evans, thank you for your support and your Human Rights Commission representation. Mr. Clark, thank you for hearing us and giving it your thought and keeping it real. We do appreciate you. Mayor Piercy, thank you very much. Mr. Reese, thank you for agreeing to give us another round. And to your lawyer, I believe that's Glenn Klein. We appreciate his extra work on our behalf. Thank you, Michael Kinnison and Mia and everyone else that worked behind the scenes. We're happy to provide you with an opportunity for camaraderie and working out county city problems by moving every 6 months. We're glad to do it to help us all evolve. NHS Rest Stop is successful. We are a community of people without houses supporting each other to better our lives. We've probably housed 30 people in permanent housing. Well, they've housed themselves in a year and a half. Probably sent 10 to 15 packing back home where they came from. About a quarter of us work, about a half are on disability or Social Security, just waiting for affordable rentals to come up. Once we finalize numbers, I just know we're a lot better off in a safe, locked up, where your stuff is safe community. We would love to be a part of the discussion of a more permanent solution to Eugene Lane County houseless community members. situation, as Mr. Clark stated, public shelter. Sounds like you may have a place for us to be. Thank you. Your care, concern, and support has been heartfelt and successful. Thank you. We are all in this together.
Thank you. Robin Hernandez is next. Robin? Yes. Followed by Heather Zalicki.
I am Robin Hernandez, and I live in Eugene, and I'm speaking on behalf of the parents of Head Start. So the Whitaker building is, it needs repairs for the roof and the kitchen and security, and it's a very large building that's an old school in not the best neighborhood, and over 200 families or children go there every year, and it's just going to expand and get bigger. And it's, for me personally, it's really important for the security because of the neighborhood. I've personally seen where transients have been escorted out off the premises in the morning, or they're being searched, and there's possible paraphernalia, and so the teachers there have to do constant searches before the kids are allowed to come in the building. So the extra security for me personally would be peace of mind, and really investing in our future, our kids. This building is going to serve, it's going to benefit everybody. It's our future. So, I mean, the kitchen there is very small, and they make meals not only for the children at that facility, but at another facility as well. So, thank you, and have a nice night.
Thank you. Last up, Heather Zalicki.
My name is Heather Zalicki. I live in Betty's Ward. I serve as the Southeast Neighbors Chair and the convener for the Council of South Eugene Neighborhoods Vulnerable Populations Working Group. It's been almost a year since the Hours Camp came through my corner of the neighborhood. The encounter changed my life because it opened me to the staggering number of people in our community who are struggling with housing insecurity and homelessness. My education on this matter has been humbling. I've learned about the ongoing efforts to respond to the crisis at the government level, among nonprofits, and in our faith-based communities. I've seen housed and unhoused people work together to put solutions in place to alleviate suffering and help the most vulnerable. I've seen in my neighbors a growing awareness of the scope of the homelessness crisis, both on an economic and a humanitarian level. Together, we're building community support around an issue that some have not expected to find in South Eugene. When Terry McDonald received applause for a concept plan to convert an empty church into a residence for homeless teens at the July working group meeting, he questioned, "Why aren't you people mad at me?" The lack of opposition surprised him. I'm not surprised. At our association meetings, I've seen informed, compassionate discussion. Our neighbors include congregations active in feeding programs, the overnight parking program, the interfaith night shelter, and homelessness working groups. The emails and responses I've received since we've started talking about homelessness in our association have been unanimously supportive. I greatly appreciate the effort that the City Council has made and that City staff continues to make to identify and implement legal solutions, such as the rest stop and the overnight parking program. I support a pathway towards allowing these solutions on undeveloped parkland and land zoned for residential use, and even near schools, to expand opportunities for community support. I think sometimes those locations may be the right ones. In August, our working group will come together to discuss locations within our neighborhood boundaries that could be used for temporary shelter before the rainy winter months set in. It's going to be at the Hilliard Center. Anyone who lives in South Eugene, I invite you to join us August 10th, 7 to 9. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to close the public forum and thank everybody for coming. I just want to really express my support for New Zone. There's a couple, I hope our staff will be helpful in with finding a facility. I know there's some in the area that have some expanded space. I don't know, there's a conversation with the old LCC building that could work out for a while. I don't know if it could be a tech business that is just across the street that has acquired some new space that might be interested in having some artists work with them there or something. So just some ideas for how we connect what's already happening with some opportunity to keep this going. I know it matters a lot to the community. Looking around, anybody else? Yes, Chris. Councilor Pryor.
Thank you. I didn't need to pull the item G off of the consent calendar, but I didn't want to let it pass without acknowledging all the people that came tonight to speak about the CDBG allocations and to indicate that these are really worthwhile and great uses for that money. Every single one of these applications is very worthwhile, and I actually served on the school board when it closed the Whitaker School, and I recall at the time it was not in the greatest shape. And so you have managed to soldier for a long time with that facility, and so even this small amount of money will go a long way towards making that much better. And Catholic Community Services has done an incredible job, as have all the others. So I didn't want to let that pass without acknowledging it, but it's a great use of CDBG funds.
Great. Councilor Taylor?
Thank you. I wanted to say that New Zone is really important to the art community, to the vitality of downtown, and for a city that calls itself a great city for the arts, it would be a shame to let it go. I hope we will find a way to do something to keep them downtown. And I'd be interested in hearing from staff what efforts we can make. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, we're going to move on to the next item. Item number 2 is the consent calendar, and Councilor Surratt has asked B to be pulled. So B is pulled. Anybody? F, and G. Well, there you go. All right. Want to put a motion out?
Yes. Okay. Make sure I've got that down. All right. I move to approve the items on the consent calendar with the exception of items E, F, and G.
B, F, and G. B, F, and G.
B, F, and G.
B is in second.
Moved and seconded. So first, we'll vote on that, and then we'll go to the other items. So the rest of them, all those in favor, please indicate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Councilor Surratt?
I vote yes.
8 in favor, none in opposition, passes. So we'll then go to item B. Councilor Surratt?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to pull this tentative agenda. I brought this to the city manager's attention outside of a meeting, but I wanted to, at this meeting, call out the fact that a approved work session that had been on the calendar for renter protection has fallen off the tentative working agenda, and I wanted some assurance that it will be put back on in early on in our calendar when we come back from our break.
Yes. Yes, it will be put back on.
All right. I can't remember doing the time. Is that how that? Yep.
Yes.
Okay, now we'll deal with item B. Okay, all in favor of item B?
Make a motion. Greg?
I move item B.
Excuse me, the motion is already on the
But I
table,
thought-
but you don't, because it was part of the consent calendar.
Yes.
Right, no motion at all.
I knew what I was doing.
You have to go
Okay.
to item F.
Been doing this a while, Mayor?
Yes.
Where are we? With all that. Okay, so we're looking for approval for item B. All those in favor, please indicate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Councilor Surratt?
Yes.
Okay, 8 and none in opposition. It passes. We'll go now to F, and that is who was F?
It was me.
Okay, Councilor Clark.
It will likely pass, but I didn't want to vote in favor of the increase of the stormwater fee.
So I wanted to be able to vote no on that one piece.
Okay. All right. Yes, Councilor Brown.
I'd just like to speak very briefly. I've already voiced my objections at a work session. I won't be supporting this item either. 7.5% increase, followed by 4 years of 4% increases a year, and I was not sufficiently impressed with the justification for the need for increase, and objected to the mixing with uses also. So, thank you.
Okay, so to vote on item F. All those in favor, please indicate. 1, 2, 3, 4. Councilor Surratt?
I vote yes.
5. And noes are 1, 2, 3. It passes. All right, now we're on G. And did you want to say anything more about that, Councilor Pryor? Or were you satisfied with that?
No, I'm good.
We'll just have to vote on it anyway. All right, all those in favor, please indicate. 1, 2, 3, 7. Councilor Surratt?
I vote yes.
8 in favor, none in opposition. It passes. Thank you. That takes care of the consent calendar. And now we'll move on to the next action item, which is to appoint members to the West Eugene Enterprise Zone Public Benefit Criteria Review Task Force.
I'm to adopt point John Roberts, Jennifer McRaven, and Pryor Public Benefit Criteria Task Force. I had it written down.
And?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Okay. Looks like everybody, you're ready to vote on that. All those in favor, please indicate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Councilor Surratt?
I vote yes.
8 in favor, none in opposition. Thank you all. Next up is an ordinance concerning imposition of a 3% tax on the retail sales of recreational marijuana. City Manager?
Thank you, Mayor. Council is asked to consider adoption of an ordinance referring to the November election, a 3% tax on retail sales of marijuana. If council likes the ordinance, then can motion to the voters for them.
Thank you. Council President?
I move to adopt Council 516, an ordinance concerning imposition of a 3% tax on the retail sales of recreational marijuana.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Councilor Brown?
Thank you, Mayor. I already spoke to this at the work session also. I will be opposing this one as well. I think it sets a terrible precedent to pick one product that some people enjoy, but maybe you don't, so it's okay to tax it. I guess the question is, what could lead to is, well, gosh, what thing that you like to put on the ballot and tax it, so I can't support it.
Your last work session, you had some conversation about how the revenues would be used, but you didn't come to any agreement on that. Ordinances that impose taxes need to have some kind of statement, however general it will be, as to how the revenues can be used. So I have a suggestion for what you would put into this one. If you want to have a longer conversation, revenue can be used. You could have that in the fall. You could have it after the election, and or what's going to the voters. You at least want a general statement. My recommendation to you is at the bottom of page ordinance in section 3.702 at the end of the first sentence. The first sentence reads, "The city hereby imposes a tax on each marijuana item sold to a consumer within the city by a marijuana retailer," that the following words be added, "to be used for general government purposes." And so if that's okay, then I'd ask the council and vice president to that as part of the motion.
Yes, I do.
So we could change it with that would show up on the ballot, or can we change that at a later date and a different language show up after we have a conversation?
This is the language that would be in the voter's pamphlet as the ordinance that's actually getting referred. If you change it, let's say in September, October, that information could be provided to the voters, but it wouldn't. This would be the ordinance that actually shows up in the voter's pamphlet.
And on the ballot?
Yes, except the ballot isn't going to actually contain the ordinance. The ballot will just be a ballot title, the question, and the summary.
Oh, okay. All right. Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Further discussion? Don't see any?
Well,
Yes?
I think it would be a horrible mistake for us to leave that as is. And I really believe that we should be as specific as possible. All the lessons learned to date so far have told us that if we want people to vote for something, it needs to be nailed down. And just having it go for general government purposes is just a good excuse to vote against it. So I think we should have that conversation that Claire brought up earlier and other people to down what we're going to use this and just have a general fund and be very specific.
If the motion is on the table now for general government purposes and you want it more explicit, then how does that, we could have that discussion right now, or we could have I think you're looking for a more thoughtful time to have that discussion.
Right. So you could either have the discussion now and then we could tweak the language before you adopt this, or you can adopt the ordinance with that amendment in there. You could have a discussion in September, and then depending on the outcome of that discussion, either you get more specific or you don't. But you can.
Is it in time then, if they do that it will be in the language of the ordinance and be in the language on the voters pamphlet, what they decide?
No, it would, if you want. I'm not sure of the timing of the voters pamphlet. It's possible that it would be in, I don't see Beth. It might be in time for the proponents committee, which is going to be made up of several counselors, to actually put it in their language. I'm not sure the due dates for the proponents committee. You have to adopt something before you go on break. That's the actual referral. And so whatever you adopt today, or you could on Wednesday, that's what is on the ballot. If you, in September or October, narrow the purposes, then the voters will certainly be aware of you having done that. You would be doing it by ordinance, so it would continue to be legally binding. That ordinance, that second ordinance, simply wouldn't take effect unless the voters approved the first one.
So if you do nothing, you will today except vote on it as currently proposed, that also gives direction that you want to have a deeper discussion in September about how it would be used. Correct? Okay. Okay. All right. So now we're going to vote on the motion, which maybe you want to read the whole thing again and add that line to it, right?
Okay. So what you would be voting on is the adoption of the ordinance. The ordinance would be what's included in your packet on page 167, except in section 3.702, the first sentence of that section, the city imposes a tax on each marijuana item sold to a consumer within the city by a marijuana retailer to be used for general government purposes.
And
the council.
do we need to redo it
No,
from what we started with?
No, because it was both the maker of the motion and the seconder accepted that as part of it, so that's what's on the table.
Right. So I think we're ready to vote on that then. All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Councilor Surratt.
Yes.
And it passes. I'd like a motion now to follow up with that to give direction.
Okay. So, I move to appoint counselors.
No. I need a motion first to give direction to staff to actually convene a council discussion in September to discuss how that tax would be used.
My suggestion is you move to direct the city manager to schedule a follow-up work session in September of the marijuana tax revenues, should that pass.
So moved.
And
Second.
Further discussion? Okay. All those in favor, please indicate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Councilor Surratt?
I vote yes.
7. In opposition? 1. It passes. All right. Now we're ready for the next thing.
One. Okay. So, I move to appoint Councilors Surratt, Evans, and Poling to the Voters Pamphlet Proponent Committee for the Retail Cannabis Sales Tax.
Moved and
Second.
seconded. Further discussion? Okay. All those in favor, please indicate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Councilor Surratt?
I vote yes.
7. And in opposition? 1. 7 to 1, it passes. All right. Then you have another one.
I move to direct the city manager to include on a supplemental budget sufficient appropriation offset by general fund contingency and the reserve for revenue shortfall to produce a voter's pamphlet.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please indicate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Councilor Surratt?
I vote yes.
8 in favor, and it passes. So we're done with that particular item. And now a public hearing on is concerning climate recovery. City Manager?
The amendments to the Climate Recovery Ordinance are replacing existing items as directed by the City Council at the June 25th, 2016 work session. The first item removes the section directing the development of a science-based greenhouse gas goal and adds the council-endorsed goal, which is to reach a 350 parts per million carbon budget by 2100 with a 7.6% annual emissions. The second item amends the section regarding targets and benchmarks, again replacing the language providing direction to benchmarks, endorsed targets and benchmarks that will reach the goals of reducing city organization carbon emissions by 20 and both city organization and community-wide fossil fuel use by 50% by 2030. The proposed amendments are goals and benchmarks, and as previously stated, all future proposed implementation actions will be brought before Council for discussion and direction.
Thank you. Those wishing to speak during the public hearing must submit a completed request to speak form to the information desk prior to the beginning of the public hearing. When you come to the podium, please give your name, city of residence, and for Eugene residents, your ward, if known. You will have 3 minutes to comment. There are lights on a timer. The red light indicates the end of 3 minutes. And there are 11 people signed up. First up is Howard Saxion, followed by Mark Rabinowitz.
Good evening. My name is Howard Saxon. I reside in Ward 8. I chair the Sustainability Commission, and it's on behalf of the Commission that I address you this evening. The Sustainability Commission unanimously voted to support City Council adoption of the proposed amendments to the Climate Recovery Ordinance that would establish greenhouse gas benchmarks and targets. Adoption of the proposed amendments are crucial if the 350 part per million goal is to be achieved. Based on data, recent data from NOAA, NASA, and other organizations, year 2016 is on pace to be the hottest year ever recorded in history. The longer we delay actions to reduce greenhouse gases, the more difficult it will become to achieve the 350 goal. Meeting the proposed Climate Recovery Ordinance goals and benchmark targets will be very difficult. Our roadmap for how we will do this is the Eugene's Climate and Energy Action Plan, CAP. This plan was adopted in 2010 and is due for an update to account for what we've already accomplished and also to lay out strategies to achieve these new and more ambitious goals. Council has included funding for the CAP update in this year's budget. However, additional city staff will probably be needed to complete an effective and timely CAP update. We recommend that the Council direct the City Manager to make updating the CAP a priority, and we also suggest that funding for CRO implementation, including work on the CAP update, be increased for next year's budget. Community involvement and consensus building in not only the CAP updating process, but other CRO implementation initiatives will be crucial. We invite you to call on us to help build community support for achieving these important goals. The Sustainability Commission not only supports the Council's doing some heavy lifting on this issue, but we hope that you will make use of our skills and energy to get the job done. Thank you.
Thank you. Margaret Benowitz is next, followed by Michael Gannon.
I want to put some specifics in all of the rhetoric. The goal of a 2020 carbon neutral City of Eugene operations is only likely to be met by the City Hall, or lack thereof. The airport is not going to be carbon neutral no matter what you pass, no matter what policies you do, or how many carbon credits you buy from a vendor. Beltline widening for hundreds of millions of dollars is the exact opposite. To call that carbon neutral is Orwellian, to be polite. The money we are giving to the contractors to study Beltline widening is the money that we should have spent on the low build alternative to deal with the peak traffic that we have now. Carbon offsets do not absorb fossil carbon. My solar panels that I use do not absorb fossil carbon. The goal of a 50% reduction by 2030 is likely to happen whether we want it or not. The Alaska pipeline is running on fumes at this point. It is being throttled back in the summer so that it can run at above freezing flow levels in the winter. When the Alaska pipeline finally conks out, we're going to have energy rationing, and we're going to be like headless chickens saying we had no idea this was coming. Fracking is past peak. We're talking about oil trains coming into the region. Well, back in North Dakota, there were 4 counties that had most of the fracking. It's done. Even if the price of oil went back up, the fuel has drilled the sweet spots. I'm old-fashioned. I believe in climatology. I also believe in geology. Geology is a science as well. And to say that we're going to direct policy for the year 2100 when we can't deal with 11 lanes widening a Beltline, how many of us are going to be here in 2100 or even in 2050? And yet there's no courage to deal with overdevelopment. Concrete requires huge amounts of fossil fuel, steel, glass. That's all very energy intensive. We can't even put in passive solar design into the building code, which is cheap and efficient, and instead we're shadowing passive solar buildings in Eugene with these ugly buildings that aren't designed to last beyond the mortgage. The energy crisis is like the eye of a hurricane. It's not exactly over. It's just a pause that fracking and tar sands gave us for a few years. And those are starting to wind down, not because they're toxic and a bad idea, but because of depletion. And depletion is the elephant in the room that no city, the environmental movement, our whole culture doesn't want to deal with the fact that the earth is round and finite. And when we're thinking about fossil fuel and the pollution from it, the real issue is food and food distribution, food transportation, because it's fossil fuels that allowed us to go from under 1 billion people to over 7 today. And as the fossil fuels go away, we're going to have to deal with much less energy into the food system.
Thank you. Michael Gannon is next, followed by Correll Ridday White.
Hi, I'm Michael Gannon. I live in Eugene. As before, I want to try to tie some things together, so I hope you'll bear with me as I think out loud. And maybe, unfortunately, we don't get enough feedback from the council to know if they understand what we're talking about, or if they're interested in what we're talking about, or if they're going to study what we're talking about, or if they think we should study what we're talking about. But I'm going forward here. I thought it was interesting to watch you vote for the stormwater user fee schedule, which I pretty much believe is forced upon us by the federal government, that we have to do something about the stormwater that's going into our rivers. And I think it's analogous to the environmental impact statements that the federal government demands now on almost everything. And a project in Eugene gets, if it's using federal funds, it's going to get
an impact statement that meets the federal standards for environmental impact statements. And I think what our climate recovery ordinance to me suggests is that we create the information that we need to manage the city to understand the impact of its carbon on the globe. So I want to jump back now to my analogy previously suggesting that you counselors think of yourselves as if you're the concierge at Teddy Roosevelt's White House and how you're going to get more black people in for dinner. Because we already have communities across the globe who are terrified at the extent to which we're burning up carbon, even in Eugene on Beltway, on 105, and around the place. And I mentioned the $1 million subsidy for the new big complex on Broadway, but when that went up, I didn't see that any imposition from the city of Eugene on the amount of carbon that was going to be burnt during the life of that building and what its impact was going to be on the city. And I didn't see that on the community development block grant funds discussion. Whether or not you're going to give certain organizations money because their carbon footprint is so much less and that the people they serve are so much greater per the amount of carbon spent. But that's the kind of thinking on almost every decision the council will make in the near future.
Thank you. Corey Alberday White is next, followed by Brittany Quick Warner.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, City staff. My name is Corey Alberday White. I'm in Ward 1. I'm a staff attorney, program manager with our Children's Trust. Last month, the Council unanimously passed a motion asking city staff to come back with proposed language for an ordinance that would amend the CRO. It would, in the motion, it asked the city to come back with language that would adopt the 350 by 2100 target, and this is important, it says, and implement an annual reduction rate of 7.6%, which is an associated annual reduction rate with the 350 carbon budget. It sets up for tonight to be a historic night. To codify those goals, we would be the first in the nation to do that. We would truly make this CRO science-based, and we would again be leading the way. Unfortunately, the proposed language wasn't posted until, I believe, Wednesday of last week. I didn't have a lot of time to get it and digest and take a look at it. I sent you all a letter today expressing what I see as a couple of key issues that can be corrected right here tonight before you do adopt this language. Specifically, where the proposed language talks about Eugene's proportionate share, and maybe you'll remember this from some of the great work sessions that city staff have put on, that proportionate share would be far greater than a 7.6 annual reduction rate. If Eugene was doing its proportionate share, it would be something like 36, 38% a year. The 7.6 number is associated with the global average share of an annual reduction rate. So as written right now, the proposed ordinance would arguably commit Eugene to having to make a reduction of something like 38%. And I know that was not the intent of council in its motion. The intent of council was, though, that an annual reduction rate of 7.6% would be clear and explicit, and it's not as written right now. The proposed language talks about 7.6% being required, but it doesn't actually require it of the city. The language I've sent you, it should be in your email. I'll read it here real quickly. I believe it adheres closely to the motion, and it expresses the intent you guys expressed there last month. I propose, as an alternate to the proposed language, that it read, the City of Eugene's total community greenhouse gas emissions shall be limited to an amount that is no more than its average share to return global atmospheric greenhouse gas levels to 350 ppm by the year 2100. And to do so, the city shall require a community-wide annual emission reduction level of 7.6% beginning in 2016 through 2050. I really do thank you for your time and attention on this.
Brittany Quick Warner is up next, followed by Deborah McGee.
Thank you. Good evening again. My name is still Brittany Quick Warner. I'm still here and living in Ward 8. I'm back here to express my cautious support for the proposed targets and benchmarks to be included in the climate recovery ordinance. While I'm not a practicing climatologist or meteorologist, I did a handful of years ago graduate with a degree in atmospheric science, so I'm familiar with the scientific recommendations before you, and I believe deeply in the global threat that we face as temperatures continue to rise. I applaud those who have spent many of their Monday nights here testifying to council and their days tirelessly advocating for these important goals and benchmarks. We are blazing the path on this issue, and they should be lauded for their commitment. Once these benchmarks are adopted, I believe that our community faces an opportunity to go from good to great when it comes to our impact on this issue and our ability to create real change across the globe. After tonight, we will quickly move towards implementation, and we will have to make a lot of decisions. We can choose to implement policies that get us to these goals in a silo and can regulate our way to an average 7.6 reduction, with disregard to the triple bottom line, our citizens, and our economic prosperity goals. This may surely help us accomplish our climate goals in little old Eugene, Oregon, but it could do little towards our hope of really blazing the trail and influencing this global issue. Or we can make a commitment to a genuine community process that allows both citizens and businesses to lead the conversation to find solutions that help us innovate our way to reaching these goals. I've been called a chronic optimist more than once in my life, but I believe that by educating and empowering our businesses and neighbors, that to decide together how to model this responsibly and support a path towards these goals, we will greatly influence our and actually impact the globe by showing other communities who might be hesitant to do this that it is possible and we can do it while maintaining a thriving economy and a healthy community. We have incredibly capable city staff and many, many willing businesses who are ready to set an example for other communities across the country, but we have to be willing to ask and really listen into the ways that they can help do that. Time is not on our side, but weighing our local actions based on our ability to really enable worldwide change is worth the time and process it'll take to get this right. Thanks.
Thank you. Deborah McGee is next, followed by Alex Loznak.
Good evening. My name is Deborah McGee. I've resided in the county on the same piece of land in Peaceful Valley for 30 years. I'm a farmer, educator, and 350 Eugene activist. Most of us are aware that a livable planet for human habitat is the 350 parts per million of the CO2 in the atmosphere. We're aware that we're at 404 parts per million, and Eugene is an amazing community. With community support, you passed the Climate Recovery Ordinance, a science-based ordinance to reduce our contribution to the climate crisis. I've been attending almost every council meeting in the past year and a half, and I was here when the city manager was instructed to craft and bring forward the goals and benchmarks as measurements toward the goals back to city council and citizens. As a citizen and community member, I want to support the CRO. I want to be able to explain and gain support for the lifestyle changes necessary to meet those goals, citizens, and neighborhood associations. An ordinance is written a little bit confusing. If we look at the proportion share of global, say, comparing the emissions of the average Eugene citizen to citizens of African nations, as our comparisons consume so much more, would be much higher than the percentage stated. So the statement about the proportional share is inaccurate. Also, as written, this ordinance doesn't actually adopt the 350 parts per million budget. So my request is that to adopt that budget, you need correct language about the proportional share and also a language to the 7.6 reduction is a mandate to bring Eugene into the reality of a 350 parts per million budget. Please don't using. We know change is difficult, but to quote an indigenous prophet, it is time to change or die. The global climate disruption is a crisis. The City of Eugene is moving in the right direction, but our CRO must be correctly stated in order to be successful in reducing the carbon. If Eugene will lead, our nation can follow. Citizens in cities are the best leaders to solve the climate crisis. Language of the
Next, followed by Lori Powell.
Thank you very much. I'll keep my comments fairly brief. So I am one of the 21 plaintiffs in our Children's Trust federal case being argued here in Eugene, Oregon, at the federal courthouse. I grew up on a farm south of Eugene.
Say your name for
My
me.
name is Alex Loznak. I apologize.
Thank you.
I grew up on my family's farm south of Eugene. I'm currently a student at Columbia University in New York, and I'm at our Children's Trust over the summer. So since becoming a plaintiff in the federal lawsuit, I'm interviewed by I've given hundreds of students in Iceland, and at Columbia University I've answered questions from friends who are from Pennsylvania to Pakistan about our climate action taking place here in Eugene. These were all very exciting experiences for someone who grew up just out on the family farm in Oregon. And I think it's fair to say that the eyes of the whole world are on this city, on the young people especially, and the community here in Eugene, Oregon. So, you all know, co-plaintiffs and I in the case are demanding a national, legally binding plan in line with 350 parts per target. And we need the city to show that it's possible to have a legal with teeth to reduce emissions by about 8% per year in line with that 350 target. And in order to do that, I urge you to adopt our Attorney Corey's suggestions, proposed amendment to the Climate Recovery Ordinance. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Lori Powell is next, followed by Babe O'Sullivan.
Good evening, councilors. My name is Lori Powell. I'm a member of 350 Eugene. Once again, I'd like to thank you all for your unanimous vote on June 27th, asking the city manager's office to prepare a new ordinance adding a critical piece to the CRO, the inclusion of science-based reductions in CO2 emissions. The new proposed ordinance addresses the intent of the June 27th motion, yet lacks consistent use of a critically important word in one section, the word shall, underscoring the need to mandate these science-based reductions. Here's how the portion of the ordinance, and I'm going to repeat what Chris said because it's so important. The City of Eugene's total community greenhouse emissions shall be an amount that is no more than its average to return global atmospheric greenhouse levels of 350 parts per million by the year of 2100, and to do so, the city shall require a community-wide annual emission reduction of 7.6% beginning in 2016. I look forward to the council approving this new ordinance using clear language consistent with the intent of the June 27th motion. In general, the more clear and precise we can make the ordinance and related targets and benchmarks, the easier it will be for all of us to educate the public about the CRO. This will lead to public engagement with the required community-wide reductions that will be needed, and it will help us more easily track CRO progress. I know that's a goal of the council and the manager's office as well. In fact, this weekend we're embarking on this process of education along with our members of our Children's Trust at the Friendly Neighborhood Association annual picnic, so that should be fun. And in closing, let's take a step back and remember why all this talk about precise language. According to the average temperature in the first 6 months of 2000 was 1.3 degrees Celsius warm. Montreal area 1.3 degrees is a very precise number that, if left unchecked, will lead to a very imprecise, chaotic, surreal world, one already experienced by so many worldwide. Thank you.
Babe O'Sullivan is next, followed by Josh Scove.
evening. My name is Babe O'Sullivan. I reside in Ward 1. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to the proposed amendments to the Climate Recovery Ordinance. I'm grateful for your work over the last 2 years to implement the CRO and set new targets for reducing our community's carbon footprint. As your former sustainability manager, I can tell you that no other city has taken such a responsible and forward-looking approach to local climate action. No other city has committed to a 300 per million goal. It's both novel and necessary, and I commend you for your leadership. Hopefully other cities will follow your example. I strongly support the adoption of ambitious new goals and local efforts to reach them. During your deliberations over the past couple of years, you've heard about the sources of greenhouse gas emissions in our community and opportunity to reduce them through various actions. As you heard, roughly half of our carbon emissions, both within and the community, are generated through the production and consumption of the goods and services we use every day. And this understanding is something that needs to be brought forward as you think about the new targets and benchmarks you're setting. When you work toward climate neutrality and the bigger goal of limiting emissions to 350 parts per million, I urge you to keep these consumption-related emissions on equal standing with those from transportation, building, heating and cooling, and other more traditional or familiar sources of emissions. This is new territory to be explored, but there's real opportunity about the needs of community members while reducing our collective impact. Thank you for your vision and your commitment to climate action that will make a real difference. Thank you.
Josh Skov is next, followed by Claire Pettit.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Joshua Skov, Ward 1. As always, thank you for your service. I'm here to speak about the Climate Recovery Ordinance. I won't address that have been proposed, but I hope to listen closely to the recommendations. Thank you to everyone else speaking of making the best of our CRO. 3 points. Stick with the target, 7% annual reduction in greenhouse gas emissions from the community. Second, expand your work in support of a price on carbon at state level. And third, press on implementation of the Climate and Energy Action Plan, even as we are waiting for the update. So a little more detail. First, stick with the target of 7.6 annual reduction. So this target sounds ambitious, and it is, but it's neither against the current trend nor even remotely out of reach, as we know from policy work all over the place. We are already seeing a steady decline in emissions around 3% annually, as you've heard, fossil fuel-related emissions here. And that's without sweeping state or federal policy or even that much implementation of our own. Expand your work in support of a price on carbon at the state level. So last you have sent, I think, really important statements in some proposed legislation that carbon pollution in Oregon. I thank you for that engagement. It's crucial for our legislators to hear that support from every angle. But there's more to do. I actually suggest reaching out to the Oregon League of Cities to ask for their help. And after all, we have peer communities working on this. We have Bend, Ashland, and Corvallis all working on climate action plans right now. Let's reach out and figure out how to speak with one voice. Third, and I think most important, press on with implementation of the plan for the. There are many actions to take this year or more or less right now while updating the Climate and Energy Action is in progress. Our plan begun in 2008 and finalized in 2010 has been on the shelf for a while, but some items have a long shelf life. And continued investment in transit and alternative modes, energy efficiency in buildings, including city facilities, recycling and waste reduction, all of these. And you may have noticed that I've selected categories, transportation, energy, and waste, where we are taking some important action, but also areas where we could do much, much more, including items that are on the table or facing decisions in the near future. We will consider new investments in transit in the near future. We have many energy efficiency measures still to pursue in our own assets, and our transportation safety commitments could be moving a lot faster. So please give clear direction to the city manager to prioritize these and other climate action efforts now, and to identify where these action areas advance other community objectives, such as public health, neighborhood quality of life, and jobs. There's urgency to this issue. There are a lot of win-win options. There's no reason to wait. And if you like a way to spend the marijuana tax proceeds. The Climate and Energy Action Plan has many unfunded items. Thank you.
Claire Pettit is next, followed by Elizabeth Brown.
Good evening, councilors. My name is Claire Pettit. I'm 19 years old, and I reside in Ward 7. There have been many speakers here tonight, so I'll keep my statement relatively concise. As those before me have stated, there's a need for more clarity in the Climate Recovery Ordinance. The kind of meaningful actions we need to happen in order to mitigate the worst effects of climate change cannot take place without absolute clarity in our proposed goals. As it now stands, the language in the proposed ordinance makes the true intent of the ordinance unclear. Specifically, I found a goal for the reduction of emissions. I wanted to point out that when I went to the City Council's website, I found that this confusion was further expressed because an entirely different and contradictory goal is expressed on the very page dedicated to the proposed ordinance. What I want to make clear in my statement is this: how can we move forward and how can we be successful if we are not all on the same page? Meaningful actions cannot be taken without unity and clarity of intention. I believe that the proposed changes to the proposed Climate Recovery Ordinance will fix the confusion and facilitate the unity of our community around an extra goal. Way for us all together. Thank you.
Thank you. Elizabeth Brown is next.
Good evening, Council. Elizabeth Brown, Eugene resident, Ward 1. I am a staff attorney with our Children's Trust. I wanted to thank you first for your public service. You have an unenviable job. I want to thank you for listening to the young people who have been coming before you meeting after meeting since 2013, asking you to take action as their local leaders, protect their future. And I want to thank you for understanding them and understanding the urgency and the need to act. And I want to thank you for acting to adopt the ordinance in 2014. I want to thank you for working to implement the ordinance, and I want to and working with the community for that implementation. I want to urge you to continue to work with the community. The community is completely behind you and supports you. And I want to thank you for passing the motion last month and urge you this evening to vote for the adoption of the proposed ordinance with the proposed clarifications that we have sent, which include a required annual emission reduction target of 7.6%. Thank you for your service again.
Thank you. I'm going to close the public hearing. Glenn, did you take a look at that language, or and probably, I don't know whether you need to hear from anybody else or not, but I don't know that that is something that we couldn't do something about.
I took a quick look at the letter that you received.
Mm-hmm.
It is not something you can do something about tonight.
Okay.
And the reason you can't do something about it tonight, is that this is both the public hearing and you're set up, if you want to take action, because you would be taking action in the same night of the public hearing, you cannot change the ordinance in any way that modifies a substantive effect. So you could take action tonight, but you're limited to the ordinance that you have. Depending on the nature of the changes that you might want to make, as you've heard me say before, if the changes are significant in that the public would not have understood that's what you're really talking about, then you need to have another public hearing that would give those people who didn't realize that's what you were talking about the opportunity to testify. And as an example, what I have heard, and I think what I read in the letter, is the intent to modify the ordinance so that there is actually a legally binding requirement that the community reduce by 7.6%. I'm not sure how you're going to implement that, whether you're going to say every single business, every single individual, every single person who works here needs to reduce their own emissions by 7.6%. What happens if that doesn't happen? What kind of system are you going to create to try to make sure that it does happen? If you create a legally binding requirement that says there shall be a 7.6% reduction, and you don't do that, then you have given people the opportunity to file a lawsuit and let a judge tell you how to do it. And so what was passed in the motion, what I understood, and I thought what most of you understood, is a goal. And maybe that means something different to me than it does to others, but a goal is not a legally binding requirement. The way the code is set up, the way the ordinance is set up, is you create these goals, the manager comes back with targets and benchmarks, and then, and it's actually in part of the code that you have in front of you, the manager prepares options for your consideration as to how to meet those goals, and part of those options, or part of that analysis, includes the triple bottom line assessment and the cost-benefit analysis for each of the options that are presented, so that when you take action, you actually have that analysis in front of you to say, yes, that option we want to make legally binding on the community, or we want to make legally binding on the city operation. So absolutely, this was set up as a goal. It was not set up as a legally binding requirement. If you want to do that, you can certainly do that, but then I would have a number of questions for you to make sure that you're all, at least a majority of you, are on the same page as to what the legal effect is supposed to be. Once you stop using words like goals and you start using terms like requirements, I need to understand how you want those enforced. Is it at your discretion? Is it at somebody else's discretion? Because all of that would need to get built into the ordinance. That's not the way this ordinance is set up. I mean, these amendments are set up. These are set up as goals and benchmarks and targets where the manager brings back options for your consideration, brings back reports as to how well we're doing, and then gives you the option to say, that's not good enough. Okay, we want to get to this level faster. Manager, bring us options.
Councilor Zelenka.
So I understand if we make any changes to the ordinance, we cannot vote on it tonight, but we can have a discussion about it. And but we could bring it up on Wednesday. That would be permissible, and pass a motion.
You could, depending on the nature of the effects. Right. You can make substantive effects, but if you remember some of the times when I've talked to you about, and usually it comes up in the land use context, if you've got an amendment that affects 1,000 people and you want to change that so it now affects 5,000 people, you have to give everybody else the opportunity. If the amendment affects 1,000 and you want to reduce it down to 500, then you wouldn't have to necessarily have another public hearing. So it depends on the nature of the change that you want to make as to whether you would need to have a new public hearing or not.
Yeah, so I actually had two changes that I wanted to see occur to the ordinance. One is to clarify the goal language of the 2100 goal, and the second was to add in a missing benchmark. And for the first one, I agree with the folks that said the goal that's currently stated is a bit can be confusing, since it started out our discussion about a carbon budget and Eugene doing its proportional share to get us there was a very dramatic curve down. And now the goal, while still scientifically based, is related to the average reduction rate that we all on the planet need to do in order to get to 350 parts per million, and that's been put together by Professor Goddard and other scientists. The language is technical, but it's important to be clear about proportional share versus average share. The proportional share language is kind of holdover language from what we were talking about before. So my proposal is to change the language so that the first part of the goal is the same. By the year 2100, total community greenhouse gas emissions shall be reduced to an amount that is no more than the city of Eugene's, and here's the change, average share to reduce the global atmospheric gas level, greenhouse gas level of 350 parts per million, which requires an average emission reduction level of 7.6. I think that's actually a little clearer, and it makes the goal simpler and more easy to understand, doesn't create the confusion with the proportional share language. The other part of that, it relates to the benchmarks. And my intention when I brought this up before in referring to the referring to the November 23rd, Mayor, can you pass that on? November 23rd AIS from staff was that the benchmarks, and there were 3 of them, be forwarded into the ordinance. And the staff's interpretation, I can understand how they got there, was only the 2 that related to our goals in there. But the one in the middle on page 2 here, which is actually the benchmark related to internal supply emissions, was an important goal. It is, as Mabel Sullivan mentioned, difficult to tackle, and it will take more time to figure out, which is why, if you look under the benchmark, it says 10% reduction per year starting in 2020. So it gave 5 years to figure this out and get us on to where we could deal with that. So it is a little bit different, but it was my intention to have that be in the in the motion and the ordinance. So I'd like to modify the ordinance to include that as well.
So we have a full schedule for Wednesday. Is there any imperative to get this done before we go on break?
Well, it's already,
I know.
We've
I know it's an imperative.
been
Excuse that.
waiting 7
Yeah,
months, so
yes.
I think so. I think there is.
So, all I wanted to just point out is that we have, I'll ask the manager, we can talk about whether any change in Wednesday is possible or not. So we can follow up on this.
Right now, what's on your agenda for Wednesday is eWeb Riverfront. We hope you pass a motion and help us come to a closure on that particular project. The Olive Lofts MUPTI program, I'd have to ask as far as timing on that. And then there's the Minority Women and Disadvantaged Business Enterprise, which has been on our agenda for
a long time.
for the fall, and wanting to try to get that moved on to the next step prior to your break.
So, can I ask you this? I could ask you tomorrow afterwards too, but is the first work session on the eWeb Riverfront update, is that time sensitive?
It is if we want to actually come to an agreement with eWeb.
Okay. Right. Yes.
Would it be possible to have the conversation tonight and then have just a motion, have a motion be forwarded on Wednesday so that we're ready to vote?
Councillor Clark.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I had some questions for Glenn here on this. 6.675 sub 1 directs the manager to purchase something. Offsets, specifically, at least as near as I understand this.
Can you say that again, Councillor Clark? Where are you?
6.675 sub 1. By the year 2020, all city-owned facilities and city operations shall be carbon neutral, either by reducing greenhouse gas emissions to 0, or if necessary, by funding of verifiable local greenhouse gas reduction projects and programs, or by the purchase of verifiable carbon offsets. So that says shall, and sets up where the manager has a duty to purchase based in the ordinance. And I want to understand how that interacts with the council's capacity to authorize a budget. So is it then no longer possible? Does this constrain a future council, I guess is my question.
No, and primarily for this reason. What is in 6.675 are the goals that the council has established, and then the rest of the ordinance has informed the manager as to how he is to work on achieving those goals. And what that really means is establishing the benchmarks and then bringing options back to the council for consideration. And as I said earlier, when he brings you options for achieving these goals, That includes the triple bottom line analysis, it includes the cost-benefit analysis, and then it's up to the council to decide, are you going to implement that option or not? It's a slightly different answer
This is prescribed, though.
but it's a goal. This is not a legally binding requirement. If we get to 2020 and we haven't achieved this level, there's nothing in the ordinance that requires the city manager to go purchase offsets. He couldn't anyway. Only the council can appropriate dollars. And it's only the council at that time that can appropriate the dollars. But what this requires is the council or the city manager to bring you options as the council, and it is then your decision. That's the way the ordinance is sent up.
Can we write an ordinance, not a charter amendment, but an ordinance that would, I know you can't bind a future council, so how would one construct an ordinance that directs the manager that he has to purchase something if we don't get to the goal, if that future council disagrees that that's how that money should be spent?
It's always true.
You cannot put something into the ordinance that would require the manager, you couldn't even do it in the charter, that would require the manager to go spend dollars in a future year. State law provides that it is the council that has the authority to appropriate dollars.
Or not.
Or not. So not even the charter can trump the state budget law in that sense. What the ordinance can do is require the city manager to bring to you, all of you, what would be necessary, and then if you don't appropriate the dollars, then the manager can't expend those dollars. Okay. It may be, depending on what the rest of the requirements are in the ordinance, that you subject the city to a lawsuit where a court may say it's going to order you, council, to spend dollars or to change the ordinance. Because as the council, you always have the ability, or a future council has the ability to change the ordinance.
Do we have examples of in our ordinance that you're aware of in other places where we might set ourselves up for similar sorts of liabilities in court?
None that I am aware of that would have been adopted in the last 20 years, because I would have advised you against it. Because I am always suggesting that future councils need to have the flexibility to make those decisions.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Zelenka?
Yeah, so I just wanted to reiterate the two changes and talk about them a little bit more. The first change to the goal is to replace the words proportional share with average share, to return the global atmosphere greenhouse gas level of 350 parts per million, which requires an average annual emissions reduction of 7.6%. I think that's pretty clear. I think that's what we're intended to do. I think it gets away from that proportional share language, which it was can be confusing, as you've already heard. So I think that's fairly simple and straightforward, and it doesn't get into the issues that Glenn was talking about earlier. The second one is a little bit different in that it has an internal goal or internal proposed target and benchmark that was proposed by staff back in November that we failed to approve then, that creates that, there are three of them. One that creates the carbon neutral operations, and one that reduces fossil fuel use by 50% by 2030, and that carbon neutral operation by 2020. The third one was more of an internal one, which is the internal supply chain, and that was the scope 3, or the embedded consumption emissions from the stuff that we buy and the products that we use. And getting at those emissions is the play the new that science is actually going to, because as Babe pointed out, it's about half of our emissions come from that, or that activity that we do. So it's a very important one, but we haven't really got there yet, and it's kind of not quite worked out, which is why the original benchmark gave us 5 years to get there before we started being able to use the benchmark. So that benchmark was 10% reduction per year starting in 2020. So my intention was to have all three of those in there, that most see how staff interpreted it to just be related to carbon neutral and the reduced fossil fuels goal. But I have all three of them in the ordinance as proposed by staff back in November.
So I can see that we need to have more conversation, so I'm not going to ask if you want to take action tonight because you don't want to. And so we'll just have to come back to this for further discussion. That's it.
Let me check with Council. Claire, do you want to end the?
No, I'm fine. Thank you.
All right. Anything else? Because I'm going to close the meeting otherwise. Nope. Okay, we've done the business of the evening.